This episode is not sponsored, but we encourage you to help support the small businesses, charities, and organisations that we mention.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Our Circle. I'm Rhiannon.
And I'm Jess.
And to our visual watchers on YouTube right now, you might be thinking, why is Jess wearing a headdress? Why am I in sparkles with my hair up in a 90s sort of situation? Well, today we are wanting to talk about Eurovision, the amazingness that is Eurovision. And we thought, what better way to then have an expert of our own come and join us. So please welcome our guest host for today, who is an avid Eurovision expert in our opinion. He is also a train enthusiast. He is obsessed with Lego. He is a pub quiz master, and his drag name is Meatball Marinara, or Marinara Meatballs. I think. Please welcome my friend James Armian.
Yay!
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, we're so excited to have you here and ask you so many questions. So I think just jumping straight into it, please can you tell our listeners, what is Eurovision? Because I had no clue about Eurovision until I met you.
You know, you're probably not alone. There are a lot of people who are in the same boat, shall we say? And for someone like me, it was something that I was very unaware of in childhood, but has something that's been actually present in this continent for well over 60 years, and it's not something
crazy,
it's not,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's mad. It's something that has been an event that has been running for so long, and yet not a lot of people are aware of it. There's maybe some reasons behind that in terms of sort of a bit of ignorance, or not knowing necessarily what Eurovision's about and what you want to get involved with. But it's a very sort of long story, but a potted history of it is Eurovision was created in around the 1950s. This was a continent, you have to remember, at that time, that was still sort of suffering from the ravages of World War II. It was somewhere where there was a lot of discord and potential unhappiness from what has happened over the last decade or so. And so Eurovision as a term doesn't necessarily just apply to the song contest that we're here to talk about today, but is actually it's a broadcasting group that was set up in 1950.
I have no idea about that.
No, I didn't either.
No, it's something that's not necessarily spoken about too much. And so in 1950 they create the powers that be in the continent sort of came together, and they created what was called the EBU, which is the European Broadcasting Union. And the idea behind it wasn't initially to create a song contest that people could dress up in fabulous costumes and go around the countries and award points to each other. Right. It was actually a group set up to provide network coverage across Europe for large events, so that it would save each individual country's broadcaster costs. So they would send a team to, say, cover the Olympics or something like that, or pool the coverage together, and then it would be all accessible from one place for everyone to be able to sort of sit in on and enjoy together. So you're looking at things like big sporting events is often the one that's used for, and still used today, actually.
That's what I want to ask then. Does this exist today then, the broadcasting?
Very often if you're watching, say, an athletics competition, the Diamond League or the World Athletics Championship, or even something that's far more niche, it could be snooker or something like that, what you'll often see is a little advertising hoarding which advertises your beer, your chocolate, your Nesquik, and your Muller yogurts, that sort of thing. But you will also sometimes just see a blue banner that says Eurovision on it.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what it is. So it's the branding for that.
I'd never even thought about like Eurovision, like the fact that it would be broadcasting like vision things, like this makes a lot of sense.
It's all clicking.
Yeah.
Even things like that. So in 1953, when our Queen was had her coronation, was crowned, that was broadcast through Eurovision across the continent on this channel. And it all sounds very boring, but it's basically every national broadcaster for each country pays a fee to access that coverage, and therefore has the right to broadcast that. So in the UK, the state broadcaster is the BBC, and so the BBC have access to that to broadcast whatever they so wish from that network of TV coverage, and one of them happens to be Eurovision. So that's the sort of the potted history of how it sort of came to be. Right. And around 1956, so you're looking 65 years ago, something like that, they decided, well, let's try and unite the continent through song. let's have a contest. And there was inspiration from a festival which used to run every year in Italy called the San Remo Music Festival, which still runs today in Italy. They still use it in Italy to select their participant for Eurovision each year. So it's something that still runs today. But they wanted to do something along those lines. So they pinched that idea and they said, let's let's try and do something where we have maybe a representative from each country come along, everyone watches, everyone votes for who they want to win, and then the winner gets that prestige, and everyone's had a lovely evening out of it.
It was the sole purpose of actually uniting everyone with something a bit more exciting or positive, like not so much just like, oh, news, let's talk about news. It's like, oh, let's actually have something fun.
Exactly. Yes, it's a lovely sort of sentiment, and it's probably something that isn't necessarily as around as much anymore. But you have to remember, at this time, it was Germany as a nation in Europe at that time didn't have the best best reputation. It was before the times of like the EU and any sort of unity with that. So there were lots of different pockets of different factions of cultural identity that perhaps weren't being seen as being together. So there wasn't that togetherness that you perhaps would get today in that respect. And so the idea behind the contest was just to have one evening where you would sit down or watch the same songs together, and you'd all vote and try and have that shared cultural appreciation of culture and song. So
there are rules. There are a number of rules that I've had to learn thanks to James. And from the beginning, I mean, I've had the joy of having a whole load of history lessons with James on Eurovision, and we watched some of the early ones, and there wasn't the same amount of countries either. It was a lot smaller, wasn't it?
No, exactly. So the first contest was held in Lugano in Switzerland in 1956, and there were only, I believe it was 8 countries it was that participated. And you go fast forward to this year, you've got 42 countries, all to compete. And you're right that the rules have changed over time and over the years. So you've got a range of rules. At the beginning, there wasn't public voting; it was juries. So a special group of people set up in each country, music industry experts who would give their votes to different countries.
And they would have conductors.
And they would have conductors, which I don't have now. Yes, no space for orchestras. Sadly, it's all on backing tracks. So yeah, the conductors could often pull off quite a look as well we know from previous watchings. And so that whole scoring process has evolved over the years as well, from being just juries to a public televote, a bit like the X Factor, where you ring up for your favourites, to there's now a mix of both jury and televoting. So you've got that entire sort of spread for popular songs and technically brilliant songs that juries would love as well. So the idea is to try and make that scoring system as fair as possible.
It's not one night, it's over, and I didn't understand this at first. So can you explain how the contest actually works? So like you said, there's 42, 41?
It hovers around 40 usually.
40 countries. We can't watch 40 countries in one night. So how does this work? For anyone who wants to try and understand how they can participate in watching this and not lose the whole day.
It was much easier back in the 50s when you had just at least 8 to a dozen countries just easy. And I think that's what the problem that the organisers had was, when it was starting off in that time, you didn't have as many countries in Europe as you did now. You had a lot of the Eastern European countries were in the Soviet Union, so you didn't have that breakup of countries. Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia were still countries around that time, and they've since sort of broken up and into individual different nations. And so the problem as you've gone along is, it's all fine and good, having 3 minutes per song to listen to each country perform. What people don't necessarily appreciate as well is the scoring part as well. So you've got everyone sings and then everyone gives their scores, and you have to go around each nation to hear each of their scores, which can take up a good part of your evening. And so the problem was then getting to the 90s, once the Soviet Union had broken up, once individual European nations were starting to find their own identity, was how do we go about, it's wonderful, we've got so much interest in wanting to compete, but we're not going to make the general public sit through 40 people now. Looking at that alone, that's 40 times 3 minutes, that's 2 hours already taken up of your time in listening, and that's not including the bits in the middle, the scoring at the end. And so there have been different ways of trying to tackle that, and in the 90s they originally tried a relegation system where the bottom countries in each final wouldn't have the right to participate the following year, which would allow those who didn't participate to enter that year.
Right.
The main sort of solution, I should say, for going forward now is since about 2003-4, they've run semi-finals during the same week as the grand final.
Right.
And so what you have is you have your main finalists, which are the host country, which is usually the country that's won the year before.
Mm-hmm.
And you have what's called the Big Five. So they are the big five countries in Europe that contribute the most financially as their entry fee to the European Broadcasting Union.
I find this rule very very questionable, in my opinion. I think
quite controversial.
Yes, because you're paying to get to the final.
To get your place.
Yeah.
Mm.
And essentially what that is the UK, France, Spain, Germany, and Italy. They pop their money in. They pay the most because they can afford it the most. You know, a country like Malta or Cyprus, for example, is much smaller. It's not going to be able to afford to put in as much to the EBU as these countries can. That said, the annual fee of being in the EBU is about half the cost of one episode of Strictly Come Dancing. So it's not actually that much in UK terms. So it's not as if, you're paying millions in order for UK to finish last each year. Yeah. So the idea is that the Big Five and the host country, the winner from the year before, they're already in the final. We don't have to worry about them. It doesn't take any places away from other countries and trying to compete as well. Those two semi-finals, it's usually about 17 or 18 countries that are in each semi-final, and from there the top 10 from each one go through into Saturday's final, where they sing exactly the same song again to a wider audience, but this time all of Europe can vote on them. In the semi-finals, only half the countries can vote on a designated semi-final.
Oh, okay.
You get given one that you can vote on, so the UK will be allowed to vote on one semi-final but not the other.
Right.
And that makes it a bit more exciting in terms of who's going to get through, and also you don't necessarily know how many points that country is going to get in the final, because they wouldn't have had those or everyone's votes in the semi-final as well.
Right.
So are the semi-finals televised? Because I've only ever watched the final.
They are televised. They have to be. So that's a sort of a requirement. The grand final is always on BBC One on a Saturday night. Tuesdays and Thursdays during that week is when the semi-finals are. I don't think it has that level of appeal to be put on BBC One or Two.
That's a real shame, because that's thinking about the whole notion of this to start with was to unite people. And, for something positive for everyone across Europe to enjoy together, for that to not be televised on something that would be accessible, like in your face, I guess. I think it's quite a shame.
to be honest, I think it speaks to the attitude of the nation towards Eurovision from here, I think. It's a victim of its own success, Eurovision. It was, in the 70s and 80s, quite kitsch, quite camp. Still is to an extent, some would say, but at the heart of it all is actually a much slicker, much more polished TV production and contest, as well as something which is fun to watch with your mates and a bottle of wine on a Saturday evening.
Right.
But I think it still suffers from having that very camp, over the top personality, and I think a lot of people in the UK, myself not included, I should say, there's a lot of people who still view it through that prism of it being not a serious competition and not something that we should worry ourselves about. It's also something that frustrates big fans like myself, who do love the contest and want to actually see it thrive and to want to see UK do well in it as well.
Yeah.
But there's a general attitude that sometimes we don't try as hard as we should, and we just send someone who just to make up the numbers and to justify the fee, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Just to very quickly go back to that rule part. So when it comes to the final, how many countries, is it then that is in the final?
The number of countries is usually around 25 or 26. That gives them time to be able to see everyone and give them a fair hearing.
Right. And then within the voting part, it's like a 12-point system, isn't it?
That's right, yes. So each country votes. Each country gives their top 10 countries that they vote for a set number of points. So for the country that gets the most votes would be given 12 points, and second place 10 points, third place 8 points, and then 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to all the other ones. So it's only the top 10 from each country in their televote that gets those points. The same is also for the juries. So you basically go around to all the countries and hear from each nation.
I have a bit of an off question, but it's still related. Why is Australia part of it?
That's the most popular question for the last 5 or 6 years, I think, that's been fired at me. So you'll remember earlier on that I said, in order to be taking part in Eurovision, you have to be paying into the EBU as a member. In order to be eligible for being in the EBU, you have to be in what's called the European broadcast area. So you basically have to be in Europe, one big time zone. Right. Now, any country can do that. It's you're in that sort of that strip of latitude.
Do you mean like as in all the way down then?
All the way down, not all the way around, sadly, because that doesn't cover Australia. But it does mean that in the 70s, there were countries like Morocco entering Eurovision, who were African, obviously. So it's as long as you are a paying member of the EBU, you have the right to enter Eurovision if you want to. It doesn't matter if you sit in geographical Europe or not. That was sort of turned on its head in 2015. And 2015 was a special year for Eurovision. It was the 60th anniversary of Eurovision happening. And the theme that year, there's a theme every year that they have built into it. This year it's Open Up. And in that specific year in 2015, it was Building Bridges. And so they thought the best thing we can do is we know, the organisers were thinking, we know that Australia are very big Eurovision fans. They're not in Europe, but they love it, and whether that's because of like the cultural similarities between that nation and this or whatever. They said, you know what would be a really good idea, just as a one-off, just for this year, let's invite Australia to participate as a standalone country, as a nation that people can vote for and that they can vote for their winner as well.
Okay.
Just to promote this theme, but it will just be a one-off. It won't be, it won't happen anymore. And so they did. They performed. They were given a free pass to the final, so they didn't take away a space from anyone from the semis. So that was something they just decided for that. And it was a gentleman called Guy Sebastian who sang a song called Tonight Again, and it was very well received. And it nearly ended up winning. It came about top 5. I think it was 5th or 6th it came.
The other countries react to that.
You know what? I think for the first year, I think the other countries really enjoyed the novelty value of having Australia in there. And there was a pretty good explanation, for saying why are Australia in it. We just say, it's the anniversary, it's for a year, blah, blah, blah. They have not stopped entering ever since. So the EBU have a reference group every year that they sit down, they decide what the rules are going to be, if they need to change anything. And they decided, no, do you know what? It was such a success last year. Let's have Australia come back again next year. Just for this once. It was really successful. They've entered this year as well. They're in it this year too. They're raring to go. They've come perilously close to winning a couple of times, not just in the first year. They came second a few years later. So that it does beg the question of, if they do win, are we going to have to all decamp to Australia and watch it? The organisers have built in a rule to that. So should Australia win, the rule is that they have to host the contest in Europe, buddying up with another broadcaster and sharing the costs with them, because it wouldn't be fair to expect another broadcaster in another country to put them up. So for the time being, Australia is but it's fluid. You could get other countries joining soon, and that'll become World Vision.
I know. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting how it could potentially expand even more than the 40 countries that we're already seeing. So that's something exciting, I guess, look forward to. What was your actual earliest memory of getting into Eurovision? Like you said, you haven't actually enjoyed it from childhood. You got into it later on. When did you first get into it?
It was probably my early teenage years. I can remember the first one I watched, which was about 2003. I was 14, and I remember it specifically. It was a Saturday night, obviously, and my mum was out. My dad offered to look after me and my younger brother, and there was something that was really awfully rubbish on ITV, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like a really terrible show, and we thought, we're not feeling this. Let's go and let's watch something else. And then I switched over to BBC One, and there was this really big sort of set piece arena style show going on, and I thought, what's this? What's going on? This is like some massive thing with huge production values. What's happening? And most people who know me will know that I'm a sucker for big set piece events. Like Olympics, award ceremonies, anything that's sort of annual, the Brit Awards, things like that. I love sitting down and making a big thing of it as I'm there, and as if I'm some sort of showbiz correspondent. So I'll sit there and I'll watch it. And we were watching it, and we noticed that there was just this sort of conveyor belt of different songs coming on in different countries. And I thought, this isn't a bad idea. This is quite interesting. This is something that I could really get into. And we watched, you know, and this was in the very sort of early stages. So we didn't know about scoring or anything. We just thought it was something that they just came on and sang for. And it rolled on for a bit longer. My dad was still cooking in the kitchen. Iranian food takes a perilously long time to cook. So, and we were just sort of, I was running out giving him updates on, oh, this song's really good. This song's really interesting. You know, I didn't like that one very much. And he was just like nodding along as dads do, you know. Yeah, that's great. And then it got to the next bit, and then I thought, oh well, that must be it. It's all over. And then the explanation came on about voting, and I thought, well, there won't be a result surely yet. You know, this is happening all over Europe. They can't have. You know, I knew about elections and things like that. I knew they didn't take like 5 minutes to sort. And then I saw the hosts again, and they said, well, the voting lines are only open for 5-10 minutes. And I was sat there thinking, really? And then went through the voting, and it was a really close year that year. That year, Turkey won, and Turkey were one of our favourites, mine and my brother Jack's. And we were sat, yeah, and we quite liked it, and we thought it was quite modern. It was quite a good song in amongst all of the others. It was really close. I remember that, and we were getting excited as the voting was getting going further on, and they were going around each country and explaining, you know, who gave what votes to which country. And it was really close towards the end. And I remember when it was mathematically impossible for Turkey to be caught and that they won the contest, we jumped up and down and we like hugged each other. A bit like, you know, like Chip and Dale when they get excited in Disney and they jump up and down and run around in circles. And I ran out to my dad and he was like, what's going on? And I went, we won, as if I was Turkish. And I said, no, I mean they won. And he said, who? I said, Turkey. Turkey won this. I didn't even know it was called Eurovision at that point. I was just literally sitting there going, they won the event, the big thing, the song competition. And that was sort of it. And then it sort of, I was really excited that they'd won. The feeling and the sort of euphoria I got from that was really palpable, you know. And I just love the idea of each country having equal power. You could get 1 point from the UK, and that would be fine. But if you've got 12 points from Malta or something, a tiny nation, that they would have as much right to elect a winner as the country did. And I think that's what I enjoyed. And I did really, the fairness. And I just really bought into the idea of coming together to vote for one song for one nation, and support each other.
Yeah.
Viewed not through a prism of sort of wars and fighting and you know trying to
definitely
it's very soft, you know, and just leave politics at the door. It comes through.
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say that's another episode, I think. I wanted to ask, is your brother still as big a fan as you are now?
I think it's one of those things where you say it's sort of a fan through consent. He's sort of
okay.
He'll get involved and he'll be interested. There is no one in my family who is at the level that I am.
Right. Well, we want to put this to the test.
Oh my God.
I have found a quiz online and I want to ask you a few questions.
Brilliant. I know I didn't agree to this. I'm sorry.
Rhea was like, shall I ask James? And I was like, no, let's put him on the spot. He's this self-proclaimed expert. Let's do it.
Can I just ask why he is such an expert though? Then this is the only reason why I was like, it has to be James that we speak to about this. When I first started working with James and I used to work together, on like a Friday, I was usually like the person playing the music in the office because I broke the radio. and so the way that I would do it is asking everyone on a Friday what do they want to listen to, and James sat directly opposite me as my line manager, so I'm going to ask him first. And I was like, what do you want to listen to? And if it wasn't Diana Ross or if it wasn't Kylie Minogue, it was Eurovision. And I just thought, right, okay. And I had no idea what I was listening to, but it got to the point where he'd say, oh, just play anything Eurovision. And I'd be like, okay then. And I'd play something. He goes, that's this person from this country at this year. And I was like, what? And he could literally do this. So this is why I'm very interested to see how you do with this quiz.
I mean, no pressure, right?
Yeah.
Right. Question number 1. How many times has Johnny Logan performed and won for Ireland?
Twice.
Well done. And he's the only person to have won Eurovision more than once.
He is. He's also the only person to have won with a song as a singer and written a song that won as well.
Oh,
look at these bonus facts. Right. Oh, I love this question. I asked Rhea this one earlier. Who is the famous daughter of Milena Ernman, the Swedish opera singer who performed at Eurovision in 2009?
That would be Greta Thunberg.
Look at you like nodding, just saying yes, I'll let her finish the question.
But only had a buzzer, like you would have stopped me like right at the beginning.
I'll just stop you right there.
Okay, well done. What's the name of the puppet Ireland entered into the competition in 2008?
That would be Dustin the Turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Irlanda Dúzapá, and it was pretty awful, but I love it. It's like, if you want like camp kitschy Eurovision through snobbery, that is exactly the way to go. It's brilliant. It's glorious.
Oh my god. Okay. What year did Finnish band Lordi win, becoming the first hard rock band ever to do so?
That would be 2006.
That's correct. Right. Last one, because I think you're smashing these. Which EastEnders star performed for the UK in 1991?
A message to your heart. That's Samantha Janus.
Yeah, Samantha Womack.
Yeah, that's her name now. Yeah, that was her maiden name, Samantha Janus.
Oh, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, that was A Message to Your Heart in Italy, and it was
well done.
Yes, well done to you. And I mean, if anyone needed any further proof of why any further questions we're about to ask James is being directed to him, that is why.
Oh, a hot flush after that. That was really
You did very well under pressure.
Thank you.
So, James, what makes a good act to you, in your opinion, versus what makes a good act in the competition?
There's a couple of things. For me, I always enjoy a bit of a beat, and some good awful lyrics, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. Eurovision isn't exactly known for its dynamic lyrics, I would say. Sometimes some of the songs that there are some which go really, full hell for leather with singing certain types of song or love songs or something, but there you do get some real corkers sometimes, which are, you don't know if they're done in an ironic way or if they're just something that's just to make it memorable. For example, there was a song a few years ago that Armenia entered called Apricot Stone, and that was, apricots are basically the national fruit of Armenia, so it has a real sort of symbolic meaning to them. But they also decided to put a giant apricot stone in the middle of the stage.
Right. Okay. Sort of, just the stone.
Yeah,
not an apricot.
No, just the stone itself. So you were supposed to ascertain that it was an apricot stone, I guess, from the start. But there are things that have gimmicks. There's often a hook that helps, if that's a gimmick on the stage or an instrument. There was one year the Ukrainian entry was brought in on stage by a giant 7-foot giant, a big guy, plonked on a plinth, and then he left. And the song wasn't entirely memorable, but that moment was. And so that often helps with winning things like that. So, I mean, for me, I enjoy the good songs, and I often do end up liking the winner, although it's not my favorite at that moment. There's got to be things like dance routines, if you've got the pyrotechnics and everything, the stage presence, that they really go big for me. And that's if that's something that is really well choreographed and the routine is fantastic, that will always score highly in my book. I do have a weakness for the ironic songs, the weak ones, the cheesy fest ones that you still get through. For the competition and for the public at large, I would say what helps a lot is the hype of the song. There are songs which are mercilessly sort of pumped out across Europe to put on the radio station playlists and things, so that when the time comes for that song to be played at Eurovision, people know it already. They feel familiar with it.
Yeah.
So they go, oh yeah, I know that song. That's a song I really like. That really worked well for Lena. She was a German entry in 2010. She's had a song called Satellite, and it was really well known across Europe. And it wasn't played too much in the UK, so we were voting on it as if as if we'd heard it for the first time. But a lot of people across the mainland Europe had heard that song before, knew it, and they enjoyed it and they loved it, and were like, I'm going to vote for that song in this contest.
In my family, it was kind of important that the country was, at least part of the song was sung in their own language. How do you feel about that?
I do enjoy the ones that are like that. It's a shame that the rule has been relaxed. So it used to be you had to sing in your own country's language, and that sort of changed around the sort of the 90s. But whereas you can sing in any language you want, there have been songs with made up languages as well, complete gibberish. And I always think it's important because it does speak to your audience, but it also broadens out your appeal to the wider audience as well in Eurovision. I don't think it's necessary to have to sing in English just because that's one of the most widely spoken languages. That said, that has helped a lot of songs with their when they have gone on to win or to do well is because people can identify the lyrics and know what's being sung about. But part of the fun
Apricot Stone probably helps
exactly
explain what that is.
Exactly, it's sung in Armenian. I don't think that would be half as, it would have done half as well as it would have done. But it's not necessarily a drawback for a song if it is sung in a native language. It just happens to be that songs sung in English tend to do better. If you were to look at the songs over the last, say, 10, 15 years or so that have won the contest, a lot of them have been in English language. And so you could probably count on one hand the amount that have won that wasn't in the native language of that country. And I enjoy looking up the songs sometimes and going, I have no idea what this is, what this is talking about. And sometimes they sound worse when you're reading in English. So it's probably better to have the native language. Well, so yeah, I always think it's always important to have that element to it. And there's always a mix, but it's usually the majority are in English, which is a shame.
So this episode obviously is coming out in May, and in this month, Eurovision 2021 is taking place. Last year, because of the pandemic, it was cancelled, which obviously was a real shame for fans such as James, and obviously getting myself into it. God, I was just like, oh. But during the pandemic, we've had other ways to enjoy Eurovision, or at least I've found other ways to enjoy it thanks to James, and I think a lot of other people have started to get into it as well, and there's been different reasons. One of the reasons that I felt people had got into it is Netflix brought out a movie called Eurovision with Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams and Demi Lovato stars and stuff. Jess, you haven't seen it yet, have you?
I haven't,
no. I don't know them, but there are a lot of previous contestants who were in the movie, but then also from last year's entries as well, because obviously the pandemic wasn't a planned thing. They had thought that Eurovision 2020 was going to go ahead, so they had all of the contestants be released, like the music that comes out beforehand. And I was obsessed with Iceland's song, and it went viral on TikTok because everyone started doing dances for it. So do you feel like the pandemic, even though it stopped it from happening, it kind of helped bring attention to Eurovision?
I think so, definitely. And the whole sort of premise of the pandemic and being sort of locked down, not really having much other than yourselves and social media, really amplified that message and the crazes that went on. And you're right, the Icelandic Eurovision entry for last year he was pretty epic. His song was quite well received, and there was every chance that I would have done very well had it actually gone ahead and been competed. Last year was going to be one of these sort of big moments maybe in this country, but maybe across all of Europe as well, or to the world who don't necessarily know about it. It was a year for me that Eurovision was going to potentially go mainstream. It still has that reputation of sort of camp and silliness and a bit silly sometimes.
Right.
But it had that it was going to hopefully smash its reputation and go, look, this isn't just about wearing your national costume and saying the most ridiculous things in your own language in the hope that someone votes for it. This is a serious competition. It's a serious event that happens every year. People love it. It has a combined audience of up to 1 billion sometimes, depending on how many people have seen and consumed the media. This is something we need to start bringing into the public mainstream consciousness. And I think the film itself, all right, it's not going to win Oscars. It's not fantastic. It's funny, but I think it has.
But you say that, wasn't it up for? It's up for an Oscar or up for a Grammy for the song that's in it.
It's certainly up for an Oscar. I'm not sure about the Grammys, but yeah, it definitely. Yeah. The song Husavik at the very end is a brilliant song, and that's been nominated for best song at the Oscars. So
I hope it wins.
But it's the film has a right measure of poking fun in itself and being a good solid film. It's got some dramatic license taken within it, so it's not exactly accurate with how the scoring works and the rules. But it's a very good introduction for unknowns, for people who don't know much about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if anyone who hasn't ever watched Eurovision, hasn't ever heard of Eurovision, watch that movie if you don't want to necessarily, if you want some sort of like way to ease yourself into it, because I think it's quite like you said, it's not completely accurate, but it's along the lines, and I think it does that quite nicely, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as any other film that adapts a text or adapts a well-known thing. It takes some liberties, and it's not going to be exactly word for word what it is. If it was exactly the same as what it was like, it would be a contest in itself, and that wouldn't be necessarily the way that they want to portray it. The upshot of it all is a lot of the people who were due to compete last year have come back with brand new songs.
That part I don't like. That part I don't like. I like the songs from last year.
So, yeah, the problem is they basically said, no, you can't have the same songs as last year. They'll probably be played to death, and it won't have the same sort of impact, I guess.
Right,
that makes sense.
During brand new. I still loved a lot of the songs from last year. Some of the songs that have been brought forward this year aren't necessarily on the same level.
Like the one that I would have put the UK as one of my favorite songs for last year, and the one that they've put out for this year, I don't dislike it, but I no way near as love. Well, and little disclaimer: when I first listened to the UK one, I had just watched. I watched an episode of The Goop, you know, with Gwyneth Paltrow, her Netflix thing. Jess, have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's her just talking about different alternative like health and well-being things, and one of them she goes to see this guy called Wim Hof who does this ice therapy. It's like going in cold water to help with depression and all this sort of stuff, but he's in the video and I jumped out of my chair at work and I went, Wim.
I will never ever forget that moment. You made me jump out my skin when I was sat opposite you at that desk. Oh my god, it's Wim Hof.
It just made it for me. So like the new song is very nice, but I was like, Wim Hof's not in this.
So James, having heard some of the entries for 2021, do you have any guesses for who you think might do well?
It's difficult to tell. I've heard I've heard all of them, actually, I should say. I've heard snippets of all of them, and all of most of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there are some I've only heard a few seconds of. I don't remember a contest being as diverse in musical styles as for quite a while, and I think it's all dependent on what the mood is going to be like in terms of what's going to be the big hitters and what's going to be accepted as there's this summer sound, perhaps, you know. And I think that's probably what the UK have gone for with the vibe this year of having it sounds the song for the UK this year sounds very much like it's very similar lines to Came Here for Love by Sigala. And I think that's probably a conscious effort to try and make it sound like modern dance music rather than what we've said before, which is just ballads by people from the 80s. So, but I do think there are a few standouts. So there's Malta have got a really, really modern sounding song, and another one that's a bit of a front runner and has had a bit of hype, which is what I was mentioning earlier about. And this is, you know, it's had a bit of bad press, but that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And that's Cyprus. And their song is called El Diablo, and
the devil.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem. There's a few religious groups in that country who are not happy for it. So
that's not really well thought there, is it?
Well, and I think the idea is that any publicity is good publicity, and that could end up doing quite well for it. The big trump card that's been played this year is San Marino. There's a lady called Senhit, and she's got a song called Adrenalina. And
you got me to hear this one the other day, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. And she's decided to feature Flow Rider on her tune. So, so that's got a bit of stardust, shall we say, to it. There's talk about whether he's actually just in that song and in terms of the sample, or if he's going to actually appear on stage. The word I've heard as if I'm like some gossip reporter.
Inside scoop.
I'm hearing from my sources that he will be on stage that evening, as long as the COVID restrictions allow. So it'd be really interesting to see whether that's A-lister style. It's not something we usually get at Eurovision when we've had like of well-known.
Jess, you were saying this to me before we started recording, that some countries they employ or hire people from like America. Like, who did you say?
Yeah, was it Russia that got Timbaland to write a song for them? Is it?
Yeah, they have. Other countries have done it as well. You know that some people have employed Red One to write their songs.
Not allowed though. Like, well, I mean, it must be because it's been done, but
totally.
It has to be from your own country. You would have thought, not have outsider help.
I mean, you think, there's no restriction on who you can have representing your country. There's no restriction on who you have writing songs for your country. The only stipulations are that it can't be more than 3 minutes long, can't have more than 6 of you on a stage. You have to sing live, and the song has to have been released after September the previous year. So as long as they hit all of those notes, there's a few others, but they're a bit more technical. It's very, very straightforward, some of the rules.
Is there any from your correspondence, is there any sort of news on what it's going to look like this year? Not visually as such, but because of COVID, is it going to have an audience, or is it going to be?
So they were very clear this year that it was going to run no matter what. So put too much money into this. So basically, the organisers came up with 4 scenarios that they would envisage doing Eurovision in, and they went from A to D. Scenario A was just normal, just so basically have a crowd, the crowds and there from an international audience, have all the acts on stage. Scenario B, which is a very limited audience, and socially distanced with some extra restrictions here and there. And then it went down to C and D, and D was the most restricted one, which was basically people perform in their own countries and they get broadcast from their home nation into and piped around Europe on the Eurovision network. So at the moment they've ruled out A because of the ongoing situation.
Ruled it out. Did you say?
Ruled it out completely. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're on B at the moment, which is a reduced audience and restrictions on number of people who can come in the delegation from each country. That could yet shift to C, where there's no audience and just the performers there. But the idea is that no matter what happens with the pandemic, is that the contest will still go ahead, and also that the performers will perform, provided they can travel from their home country into the Netherlands where it's being hosted. If they're not able to do that, then they're also able to perform from home, from a studio. But we'll see. And at least they've laid out those options so that they have something to fall back on if necessary.
So historically, you've hosted Eurovision parties and had a way to enjoy it. What are your tips for everyone to enjoy Eurovision this year? Because I mean, we've done our own ones, obviously, throughout the pandemic, where we've had, you've sent us links that have been done online through YouTube or through Twitter, where we get to watch previous Eurovisions, and we didn't know, well, I definitely didn't, you probably did, you knew who the winner was, but I didn't have a clue. So I was like, right, I'm voting for this. And you could either join the Twitter voting thing where you act as if the 70s are happening all over again, or you do it with James where he'll do all of the voting system for you. But how, and just for anyone who wants to do their own one, the way that we did it was the song, like you vote on the song, you vote on the outfit, and you vote on the performance. So I would often listen to the song and be like, right, this song could probably be good, but the performance was awful. So that would get different points. But how would you tell everyone to enjoy or how to experience Eurovision from home this year?
It's proving to be hopefully a very exciting year for doing it, because it will be completely fresh for everyone, hopefully. But yeah, the scorecarding came from the BBC Eurovision website. So that's something that everyone can get involved with. So it has those same 3 categories. And around the time of the contest each year, they will put up a PDF of each country's and each song. And it allows you to then score it the way you want to. So that then means that you can then make an informed choice about the song that you want to win, not just based on, oh, I like that beat or I like what she's wearing, but you've got a sort of a weighted way of sort of saying, yeah, it's not just middling, it's something's really good or something's really bad. So that's where I tend to use it from. So I definitely keep an eye on there. And that's fed into my Eurovision parties sort of that I used to run. And when I was living at home with my mum, that was something that came about. It was a few years after watching the first Eurovision. I thought I'd been watching them for some years now, and I enjoyed seeing them come around. And I said to Mum one year, do you know what? Don't make any dinner tonight. I'm going to go to Asda with my older brother and just pick up a load of, like party food that kids would have, like cocktail sausage rolls and things like that. And I was always looking for a way each year to sort of build on that and to try and make it better and bigger than previous years. So the following year, I went on to Amazon and I bought some European flag bunting so that I could then pin it up across the ceiling. Then I would look for other flags, like Union Jack flags to pin up around and use as tablecloths. And then I'd have the scorecards. And then one year I decided, you know what, it's all good having the same food every year and half of it goes to waste, but let's make it a bit more exciting, a bit more relevant to Eurovision. So we then, my brother and I, each year we would go to Asda and we would fulfill ourselves with a brief of try and get something from each European nation so that you can try and have
I love that idea.
Wow.
I love
that's cool. That's really cool.
So you would have like Polish sausage and Norwegian cheese and Cypriot or Greek halloumi or yogurt or something like that.
Yeah.
And we suddenly realized after about half an hour traipsing around the supermarkets in the first year we did it, we thought we're going to have to start thinking a bit outside the box on this and a bit laterally. So you ended up with a French stick or a box of Maltesers chocolates or things like that. and said, "Yeah, oh yeah, this is definitely Swedish meatballs, perfect, fabulous." But I've got cheeses from Malta, Belgian chocolates. Some were really easy, just flow off the tongue. But there are others where you go, Bosnia Herzegovina. What am I going to get?
Yeah.
So we didn't manage to hit every single country, but we do get a good range, and we've actually broadened out our tastes quite well out of it. Actually, I'm now a big fan of halloumi. So it was a really nice way of just sort of making it a bit more cultural
So I think that's such a great tip though for everyone. Obviously scoring cards if you really want to get into it, because it does help you there's a lot of people that you're watching, obviously, so I think sometimes writing it down, that helps. And then having the food element, who doesn't enjoy trying different foods? Like, God, that makes everything better. So you've got music, you've got scoring, you've got food, like
make a whole evening of it.
Got the free-flowing wine, I'm sure that'll be running.
Definitely. That would be a way to get yourself through some of the countries, get wine from different countries.
Was it Terry Wogan used to host it, and didn't he used to drink throughout it, and he was absolutely smashed by the end of the night?
Really?
Very often the case. It was so Terry Wogan hosted from about the 80s to about 2009, and I think he grew a bit disillusioned with it all, so he sort of handed the reins over to Graham Norton, who still sort of does.
He's funny.
I love him.
And Terry would always have a thing where he would say he would always have his first drink after song number 9, because that was when he started to feel like he needed to have a drink. And so since he died, Graham has done a thing where everyone at home would raise a glass after at song 9 to Terry.
Nice.
To drink at that point. But yeah, it was odd how they come from different sort of schools of thought, Graham and Terry. So Terry was very much sardonic, and he was very sort of cutting about some of the outfits or hosts or choices of, and it almost came from a sort of disdain sometimes. It sounded like that anyway, but I think he did enjoy it because he hosted it one year when the UK won it, so it's not as if he was
I don't want anything to do with this.
You won't catch me on the stage. Whereas Graham's always been a big fan of it. He used to host it on his Radio 2 show, and he used to talk about it on there. And he does tease and he does mock, but it sort of comes from a different place, I feel. And it's because
that's his sense of humour anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not like it's just like, oh, this is a rubbish thing. It's just his sense of humour.
It's not mean-spirited either. It's all in good fun, I think.
It's not in a nasty way. I mean, one of my favourite comments he's ever said is when they're going around the scoring, and there was a lady who had like this wavy piece of fabric sort of stuck into her shoulder at an angle that was coming up, and he said, well, it looks like a piece of corrugated iron has just blown off and hits her in the neck. And that's the sort of humour that gets you through an evening like that, especially where you've got so much scoring. The scoring
that's true.
An hour sometimes over an hour. So you need that person just keeping it fresh and not having to look at numbers every 5 seconds.
Well, I think from this conversation, and I'm sure we could keep going on and on about it, but I think for anyone who does want to get into it this year, I think taking from James's tips here is definitely do the food, do the dressing up, have your scorecards and everything like that. But I would also encourage you to go onto Twitter. I would encourage you to follow James, because he does give a running commentary. So if you don't want to listen to Graham Norton give one, listen to James. It's very, very enjoyable. And I think everyone would really, really get into it. And I love the idea of everyone coming together for something, to come together for song and for music, as opposed to politics and war and all that sort of shit. So thank you very much for speaking with us about all of this. And I just want to put out to you our question that we ask all of our guests, which is, what makes up your circle? I think we can take a wild guess, but what makes up your circle?
I mean, I think the introduction at the start was very much my circle. So Eurovision, Lego, trains, that sort of thing. But I mean, there's obviously the 3 Fs. There's my fiance Rich, there's my family, my friends, which are massively important to me. I have a very small circle of close friends, very close friends, and I'm very selective about who I have in there, but they're always there for me, and I know I can chat with them anytime I want to.
So we like to dedicate every episode to either a small business, a charity, or an organisation, and as you're our guest, we would like to ask, who would you like to support? So
thank you for this opportunity, because it's an organisation that's not very well known at all, and I only knew about after the reason I needed to use them, really. And my organisation is called CRY, and that's or CRY, whichever they prefer, and that stands for Cardiac Risk in the Young. Something that you may not know about me, or your audience may not know about me, is that I underwent open heart surgery about 5 years ago now. And that was an undiagnosed heart condition that I'd had from birth that I didn't actually realise I had until I was about 21 years old. And it was basically, I ran for the bus one day, and there was a problem with my eye and my sight. And 18 months later, after investigating everything and knowing it wasn't something wrong with my eyes, they actually realised it was something wrong with my heart. And it was quite amazing that sort of led to that. And so it was a faulty valve that I needed replacing, and that happened in 2016. We also discovered from that my mum also had exactly the same thing, and so she needed hers replacing the following year as well. And had it not been for me running for that bus one day, I was told in no uncertain terms by my cardiologist I would be dead. They often find this condition that we had. They often find it in postmortems where you've essentially died from it because it's ruptured or because something's happened to cause you to die. And so what CRY do is they support young people who have been diagnosed with life-threatening sort of cardiac conditions. They also offer bereavement support to families who have sadly not been able to get that diagnosed as well. But what they also do is they promote and develop heart screening programs for young people. So they subsidize it for 18 to 35 year olds. And it's an opportunity for young people to go and get their heart checked, have an ECG, have a what they call an echocardiogram, and just to make sure that there's nothing untoward that's going on. I mean, your heart is a very resilient organ, but it's also something that can suffer a lot and go through a lot during life, and it's best to make sure that that's in tip-top condition so that you don't actually have any problems with it. They also do sort of all sorts of services at hospitals, and they distribute research and they try and publish as much as they can in terms of research. They often run these screening programs throughout the year. Obviously with the pandemic they're not going on as much as they were, but once they're up and running again, I would highly recommend that anyone within the age range of 18 to 35 just has a look at the website, see what they can do in terms of if they want to make a donation. That'd be fantastic to help with the screening.
Definitely.
Even if they want to book themselves for a screening, though, they can absolutely go ahead and do that. The procedure itself, it's very non-invasive. It's a bit like an ultrasound of the heart. It's just to roll a ball over the chest. It's nothing painful, and I'd highly recommend it to anyone just to make sure that you knowledge is your friend. If you know that you've got wrong and something can be fixed, it's better to know now than when it's too late.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So that's such a great cause for us to be able to support today. So if you obviously anyone who is watching the YouTube video, you'll see that all of the information is on the screen now. For anyone who is an audio listener, we will put all of the details in our description boxes across all of our streaming platforms. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for joining us today. We've loved having all of your information, and just can't believe that you aced that quick. I mean, I can, but you know,
it's impressive.
But thank you very much, and
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you everyone for listening. Please make sure to like and subscribe and check us out on all of our streaming platforms, and we'll see you for our next episode.
Bye.